Chapter 18. Nothing that can be done. Mixed up with the thoughts of dying from fighting a hopeless battle and never seeing Karnak again, Angelique's heart was beating fast in her chest. Had she stayed with him like he wanted, she would be safe beside him at this moment, but she knew that wasn't the person she was. She had thought about doing just that, but couldn't put her family's safety above her own. Now looking down the barrel of the pistol General Y held pointed at her head, she feared neither her family would be saved, nor would she be able to feel Karnak's arms around her once more. Looking down at Todd, Angelique could see the blood pooled around his neck. Anger from deep inside seemed to take control of her. C looked to her other side at Ken, and she could tell he had the same thought. Fight and die, or do nothing and die. "Now!" Angelique screamed as she called up all her strength, dropping to the ground and pulling the Chinese soldiers together, hoping they would collide. Ken had taken a step back in hopes of pulling the two, holding him together. After a few seconds, the Chinese soldiers were on the ground atop both Angelique and Ken as they wrestled. When it was over, all Angelique and Ken had managed to do was draw more soldiers, each helping the other two hold them down. Now, with soldiers holding their arms and legs, their movement was very limited. Y laughed at the sight as if he were a comic book supervillain. "Did you think it would be that easy?" Y asked as he began laughing again. Cutting off the laughter in an instant, Wee became very serious as he spoke and pointed the pistol at them. "Now I will ask one last time. Where did you come from?" "Go to hell, asshole," Angelique demanded of him, wishing she had one of her pistols to send him there. Taking a step closer to where his men held her down, General Y raised his pistol. Such a waste of beauty. Angelique could see the pistol rising and knew time had run out. She wanted to close her eyes but didn't want Y to think she was scared. As images of her parents and Karnak flashed through her mind, she waited for the bullet. She heard the shot clearly but felt nothing except warm liquid on her face and the taste of iron from the blood on her tongue. It wasn't until she heard many other guns firing that she realized the round hadn't struck her. But why? Looking into his eyes, she saw the surprise on his face as his right hand holding the pistol dropped, and his left came up to his body armor where a 2-inch hole now was. Not quite understanding what had just happened, she watched him fall to his knees, unable to take her eyes off the man she had expected to be her executioner. Angelique's trance was broken when Ken dove at one of the soldiers holding her down after the men holding him had been shot as well. Angelique's anger returned as if it were an internal explosion. With her hand free, she felt around on the ground for a weapon but found only a small stick. "That'll do," she thought, curling her fingers around it, and with all her strength, burying it deep into the eye of the soldier holding her other arm. He instantly released her, screaming in pain as the sound of gunfire raged all around. This is too easy, she thought, as she watched a soldier raise his head and look straight at her with his arms wrapped around her legs. With both arms free, Angelique opened her hands and clapped them together, catching the soldier's head between them. As her palms made contact with his ears, the air pressure caused his eardrums to burst, and he released her legs and rolled on the ground in pain. Now free, Angelique looked around for her .45s. She felt lucky that the general had taken a liking to them. Staying low and reaching to where he had fallen on his side, Angelique rolled him over on his belly. There they were, tucked into his belt, one on each side of his spine. With bullets and blood flying all around, Angelique drew her pistols from the general's waist and began searching for a target. Looking toward the house, she could see Ken engaged in a hand-to-hand fight. Quickly and without rising from the ground, she stretched her right arm out and squeezed off a shot, placing the bullet directly in the side of the soldier's head. Surprised by the sudden explosion of blood and tissue, Ken jumped back, lowering the fist he had raised. Looking over, he saw Angelique on the ground as she placed a bullet in two soldiers, who screamed and rolled around. With those around her dead, Angelique aimed at a soldier about to stab Blankenship, who had been tied up. The first to be tied before Todd was spotted, he was now one of the most vulnerable. Before she could pull the trigger, a shot rang out just feet from her. Quickly, she brought her pistols around to where the shot had come from, only to be surprised that Todd had fired it. He was half sitting up with a small pistol in his hand. "Told you I would kill you," he said as he watched the man who had struck him earlier with his rifle fall to the ground. Noticing Angelique's reaction, Todd threw up a hand. "Whoa there," he quickly shouted, seeing her pistols pointed in his direction. Though she wanted to check on him, Angelique began looking for other threats. She watched as Blankenship placed a few kicks to the head of the man Todd had just shot. No others were alive. Angelique had a hard time with what to do next, as she had planned on already being dead. She needed to check on Todd to find out how the hell he was still alive and discover who had saved them. The latter, she decided after a second of thought. That question was answered as at least 10 men came out from around houses, dumpsters, and many other places they had been firing from. "Who the hell are you? I mean, thanks a hell of a lot, but who are you? What did you shoot that asshole with to go through the body armor?" Angelique couldn't remember ever asking so many questions at once, but she still had a large amount of adrenaline pumping through her system. "Ma'am, we are the Ozark Mountaineer Militia," one man said as he neared. "That shot was from a Barrett 98 Bravo loaded with bronze bullets. You can thank Steve for that." He pointed to a rooftop 500 yards back in the direction from which Angelique and the others had traveled. "Well, once again, thank you," Angelique said while moving to check on Todd, who she had thought was dead. "You okay?" she asked, reaching out a hand to help him to his feet. "Yeah, fine. The bullet struck the top of the plate in my vest. It hurt like hell, but I think it stopped most of it," Todd answered once he was on his feet. Angelique could see where the bullet had struck, sending fragments up under his chin. "We're going to have to dig those out later. Hold still." Angelique could see a large fragment of the bullet protruding from under his chin. She pulled it free with 2 fingers as Todd cringed from the pain. "Here you go. A little souvenir for your troubles." She placed it into Todd's hand as she turned to check on the others. "Where were you 3 headed?" the militia leader asked Angelique. "What's your name?" "I'm Angelique." She extended her right hand. "Michaels, Gabriel Michaels." He shook Angelique's hand before continuing to speak. "We really need to get moving. More patrols will be on their way. Where were you heading?" Gabriel asked once more. "Gabriel, we are on our way to the Robert Young building," Angelique informed him, only to have her words cause a disturbed look to appear on his face. "First, you can call me Gabe. Second, do you 3 have a death wish? That building and those around it were destroyed on day 1 of the invasion." Angelique could feel a sickening feeling come over her at the thought of her parents being in the building when it was bombed. "Are you sure?" Angelique asked, hoping for a different answer. "Very. My plane had just landed when the EMP took out all the electronics." Gabe hung his head, recalling the memories of that day. "I watched as others were not so lucky. After surviving that, my only thought was getting back to my family, so I started walking. After a few days searching for my son, it happened. Rockets came in from all over, taking out the government buildings first. The Robert Young building was one of the first hit. Did you have family there?" Gabe asked when he had finished telling Angelique about what he had witnessed. "I believe so. They were taken by Homeland Security." The sick feeling in the pit of Angelique's stomach turned to anger at the thought of what had taken place. "We should get back and report to Karnik what is happening here. Gabe is right. Other patrols will be coming any minute now," Ken said, noticing as Angelique looked in the direction of the Robert Young building that lay in rubble. He could tell she was having a hard time accepting the information, and most likely was considering moving on to see for herself, a journey that would only end one way, with all of their deaths. Gabe called out to his men, "Gather weapons, supplies, and whatever you can carry. We are moving out in 5 minutes." "We should take the trucks," Angelique said as she came to the realization that her parents were gone. "Todd, would you help Ken get the civilians and the wounded loaded up?" Angelique began focusing on their new mission. Without saying a word, Todd waved Ken over, and the 2 began helping those who needed it to the trucks. The second Todd had killed the man Blankenship had been fighting. He had run back to his group. He was full of fear at what had become of Kaylee after so many had been executed by the general. Nearing the group, he saw many lying motionless on the ground. Those who were still standing were in shock. "Kaylee!" Blankenship screamed as he looked around, not seeing her standing with the others. Blankenship shouted again as he noticed a black curly ponytail under one of the dead. Rushing over, he rolled the bloodied corpse over, revealing the little girl beneath, covered in blood. Tears filled his eyes at the sight of her as he dropped to his knees beside her. Removing the sweat-soaked towel from around his neck, Blankenship began wiping the blood from her tiny face. "Kaylee," he said softly, knowing he wouldn't receive a response. Through his tear-filled eyes, he thought he saw her eyelids move but dismissed it, believing it was only what he wanted to see. Then her eyes sprung open, and a smile appeared across her small face. "Kaylee," Blankenship said, his voice trembling with emotion. Blankenship slid his arms under her as he filled with joy. Standing her up and looking her over, Blankenship could see that the blood covering her body wasn't hers. Giving her a loving hug, relieved that she was unharmed, his feelings of loss quickly left. "Sir, we need everyone to load up in the trucks." Hearing the voice, Blankenship looked up at the man who had saved his life moments before, as blood ran down from his chin. "Thank you," Blankenship said to him. "I don't know who you people are, but I do know we would all be dead right now had you not shown up." "We'll fill you in later, but right now we must move," Todd said, looking down at the man holding the blood-soaked little girl. "Everyone help those who need it, and move to the trucks in front of the house. Move!" Todd didn't want to waste a second putting distance between them and the Chinese, who he believed were already on their way. Now on the move, the survivors from Blankenship's group thanked those who had saved them from certain death. Angelique watched and helped gather weapons and gear from the Chinese. In a time like this, leaving them behind wasn't an option when every round could be put to use. After gathering all she could carry, Angelique made her way to the Chinese troop transport with the others and placed the items in the back as people boarded. "We set to move?" Angelique asked as Ken came up behind her. "Any second now." Ken helped one of the wounded civilians up into the troop transport. Turning to Gabe, Angelique felt she had to get more information on his group. "You and your men coming with us?" "Ma'am, I was about to ask you the same question. We have been waiting for them to start moving out of the city and could use the help when they do." Angelique thought about what she had observed up till now and understood that what the Ozark Mountaineer militia was going to attempt would be brave. Angelique also understood that they wouldn't last long without support. "Gabe, I believe we can help with much more than just us three. Get your men loaded up, and we can talk on the way out of here." Liking the way Angelique had said much more, Gabe quickly decided to listen to what she had to say on the way out of the city. "We need to stop and pick up Steve on the way out." "Then we need to get moving." Seeing that Todd and Ken gave her a thumbs up from the lead transport signaling that everything was good to go, Angelique and Gabe swiftly climbed into the cab of the first transport, with Gabe behind the wheel leading the way out.